Hey everybody, it's Farand Wasiak with the IACIS Podcast. I'm here with IACIS President Gene Shantz. Gene, how are you doing today?
Doing well, thank you, Waz.
Good, yeah, great. Thank you for being on our show.
Absolutely.
I know our viewers, our students and staff, and anybody else out there is looking forward to this broadcast. Gene, last week when we did the Celebrate podcast, I believe I stated that IACIS was formed in 1991, but you correct me. It was actually 1990?
I believe, yes, because this is our 33rd year, and 1990, I believe, is when it was formed. I could go back. Maybe 91 was the year it was incorporated, but
okay.
But I don't want to be quoted on that. But it's my understanding that the organization was formed in 1990. We could pull up the bylaws and see all that on that date. But yeah, we're in our 33rd year, and formed by a bunch of police officers that were kind of got together. We're doing a lot of reverse engineering on digital media and started teaching each other. And then they realized there's no other place out there, that there's nowhere to go to get it. All the data was proprietarized, and I'm summarizing. I was not there. I wasn't part of all that stuff way back then, but I've heard the stories told over and over again. And what's really cool is all that work, like the EO1 for the expert witness format, all that stuff, that was an in-case, a guidance software deal. The guy that developed that was one of the original members. Okay. And many of the practices that are taught in colleges and university came out of what these founding fathers and the early trailblazers did, and all that reverse engineering. Chris Thippich with Digital Intelligence is actually a great one. If you ever get him cornered, buy him a drink and have him tell you the story, because it's amazing when you start going back and talking to him about all the stuff that happened back then and all the technology that came out of it, and these big companies that were made because of the work these founding fathers did, or these original members did. So yeah, goes back a ways.
1990, 1991, I think email was still used maybe just by government entities. I don't think it wasn't mainstream. You know, today, when we're not at a conference in today's day, we do everything on Teams. We have Zoom meetings or Teams meetings. Everything's done remotely. That's how we run as an organization. What back then was everything done, I guess, snail mail and telephone calls. You would assume, right?
I don't know. I mean, I think email was around in the 80s, because I remember you got mail with AOL and stuff like that. I think I got my first personal computer in the somewhere in the 80s, late 80s. I mean, my dad, I remember as a teenager, my dad had a Texas Instrument that was just a keyboard, and we had to use the monitor, the TV as a monitor.
Yes.
And everything was recorded on an audio cassette tape. So I mean, that's how far back my recollection of that goes. But yeah, to tell you whether or not snail mail was around or email was around back then or not, I couldn't be 100% sure. I know I didn't get my first cell phone until I was like 98, 95, 96, somewhere in there, when cell phones, when I started my own company and was doing construction work. But technology's come a long way.
Absolutely.
To your previous statement, I mean, when I got certified in 2007, we did our certification on a floppy disk. I mean, we used disk edit. We had to use free DOS, because at that point, DOS was dead, basically. And there was licensing issues. There was all kinds of problems with that. So, and then we eventually moved into using forensic tools to be able to do the same thing we were doing with disk edit. So, which was, that's now we're teaching what we did back in 2010, 2011 is when we made that transition. So
the growth of IACIS with these conferences, did the conferences or the training events, did they start immediately, or did they just evolve over time into this big conglomerate we have now?
So the board of directors kind of provides the vision for where IACIS goes and where we want to be over the course of the next few years. And I think that's kind of held true I've been on the board. I just completed my 10th year on the board, my 5th year as president. And yes, I mean, I can tell you, when I attended the Sheridan in 2007, I want to say there was about 180 or 190 students in the class, and that was so impressive to me that we had that many people in the class. They had specialized classes that I didn't really have visibility into as a student, because I was never in those classes. But when I came back on staff in 2010, we were still at the Sheridan, and when was it? I want to say 2011, 2012, we moved from the Sheridan to the Marriott up in Lake Mary, and where we were able to get about I want to say around 180, 190. It wasn't really a growth move; it was a lateral move.
Okay.
But it was a nicer hotel. We had a great relationship with the hotel manager that used to be at the Sheraton, had gone up to the Marriott, and we had a number of rooms there. But we were rapidly growing. We had people that were wanting to come in and participate in the basic class.
Yes.
I remember one of the last classes we taught. We had 2 last-minute people come in, and the only way we could put them in the room was to line them up facing towards the class on the side, because they were begging. They said, "We'll take any seat. We just want in." And so we set it up that way, and it was like, okay, we got to do something different. And then a couple of our directors, I think Mark Johnson and Brent Weld, started to go on a road trip, and they found this place. And they were like, this is impressive. And we realized that there's a lot of potential for growth here.
Oh, absolutely.
And so we moved in here. We've been here for 7 years at the Caribe Royale, and it's suited us very, very well. We've grown. I mean, our first event that we put on here at the Caribe Royale was 350 students in the BCFE class. That was massive. It was so big that even the way because we were coming from being the big fish in a small pond, we were now the small fish in a big pond here. There was a lot of learning curves, and it was felt it was just too much. Let's pare it down to 300 and go from there. And then we also decided, hey, this is going to be a good time to start bringing in vendors, to start bringing in their followers that wants to get their certification and bring them all into the network of what is IACIS and bring them in. And it's actually worked. Talking with the Axiom class that's being taught this week down the hall, he mentioned that several of his students that were in the class last year, in his Axiom class last year, are up here now taking the BCFE class this year.
Okay.
So yeah, it's grown, and it's just kind of taken on a life of its own. This year, we're at 324 students in the basic class. We increased it a little bit. And then overall, because of the vendor classes and the additional classes IACIS has added to our list of classes, such as the RAM class, the inscripting or the scripting class. We have the DPICT class, which is the attorney class down at the other end of the hall. We have an OSINT class that was new this year. Because we've added all those classes, we have, I think, in total about 700 students that are coming through this event. And we have our largest number of staff ever, we were just under 150 staff.
Wow,
and that includes you and the teachers in the BCFE and board members that are here and just management staff to help keep this thing on, moving along. So definitely one of our biggest events.
Yeah, it's not so much the instructors; it is the behind the scenes staff, the support staff that keeps this machine, fluid and moving.
There is a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. I mean, the training side of it it's been so finely tuned and polished over 30 years that once the train kicks off and leaves the station, it just goes. I mean, there's always going to be a little issue here, a little issue there, but those guys they know exactly what needs to be done, how to fix it. If they get off topic or they go a little bit long, they absorb it here or whatever, and it's pretty transparent to the students. But what goes on behind the scenes, John Ohm in the Hibiscus room, which is our operations team, or what we used to call the road boss.
Yes.
He manages all the equipment and making sure the rooms are laid out the way they need to be laid out to get the right number of seating in there. I interface with the hotel to make sure that we got everything under contract that's supposed to be there. And the hotel's been good with us. We get probably more concessions from this hotel than probably any of their other contracts. I'm speculating on that, but I've seen our concessions and I know what they are. And then you got the board of directors who also help out. We usually run the registration nights. We hold our board meetings throughout both weeks while we're running around doing other things. And then you've got Dave Melvin, who's our secretary, who's running the office. We got office staff in there, print certificates, the name tags. There's just a lot that's going on. And then, of course, this is our first time doing a WebEx. Not a WebEx, sorry, a web conference or a podcast. Thank you. This is awesome. This is so cool that we're actually doing this live from the event. So I just think it's, and our marketing, I got to throw a kudos to Rich Johnson with our marketing. I've seen more vendors here at this event than I've seen at any other event. We've had a lot come through here. And so it's just been an outstanding way to grow, and it's just really cool.
Yeah, and we're using social media to our advantage. We advertise or promote every aspect of IACIS through the various avenues of social media. So that's one other aspect that it shows that it's the sign of the changing times and how we're evolving with those times.
That's correct. Yeah. We the social media impact, I think, has been really big.
Yes.
And the fact that we're now doing a webcast, that we work with Cyber Social Hub to do a podcast with them, and it's just been really good for us all the way around.
Yeah, and that's quite the evolution from 1990-ish Oregon, right? That's where
we're incorporated, correct?
And then it spread through the United States, North America, and now we have members and staff in South America, Asia, Africa, and the Asian Pacific. It spreads. I mean, just our pamphlet alone shows all the flags, and the big room has all the flags hanging in the big room. That's amazing how it's spread throughout a global organization.
I don't recall off the top of my head how many countries we represent, but I think we have it on the website, or it might even be in our pamphlet here. But yeah, we've been actually asked to go teach in Australia. We've been asked to teach in Hong Kong. We've been asked to teach in we do a European event every year, teach in OLAF, which is the European Anti-Fraud Union deal. They contract us to come over. We've been asked to go to India. I mean, we've been asked to go a lot of places. And it's funny because we were just having a conversation with a law enforcement member of IACIS who is working with the White House that is trying that told us, if you go actually look at government agencies on Indeed, the CFCE is actually a requirement for a lot of those agencies, which is really good. The CFCE has become the law enforcement standard. Now, there are a few private companies that are requiring the CFC, but they're not as we haven't gained quite the traction there yet, but it's getting better every year. So, I mean, last year we had Deloitte come down as a sponsor to talk about their company.
Yes.
You know, my company, Aon, they allow us to come down here and teach and give back to the forensic community. So it's a good thing all the way around.
Good. Gene, we spoke in depth about IACIS, but let's spend a couple minutes on Gene Shantz, from your days as a police officer to your current professional role now, as well as your role as the president of IACIS.
Sure. I don't know that I'm that interesting. I mean, I got out of high school and started a contracting company, and I did that until 2002 when I was recruited into law enforcement. And at that point, I was just happy to be a cop. I enjoyed the job. And I walked into my sergeant's office one day, and I saw him doing a peer review problem set in the office on Diskette. And I was like, "Is that computer forensic stuff?" And he was like, "Yeah, you know," he's a little gruffy guy, and he's like, I said, "That would be really cool to be part of that." Well, as time went on, in 2006, I promoted to corporal. 2004, I promoted to corporal, and I moved up to the detective division. And we just sent somebody through IACIS in 2006, and there was another detective that was earmarked to come in 2007. Well, right before he could come here, it was like literally a month out, he got promoted to sergeant. And because he was going to sergeant, they said, "Well, we're not going to send a sergeant there because he won't have time to do exams. So, Gene, do you want to go?" I was like, "Yeah, I want to go." So I come down here, and the rest is almost history, because I really fell in love with the organization and everything it stood for. And like I said, I got back then the certification was a year-long process, almost a year-long process. And I submitted my final exam in early January. It was either late December of 07 or early January of 07 or 08. I got my certification right in that time frame of 08. And then in 2009, after doing some exams and getting a little bit more comfortable, I came back as a peer review coach, volunteering my time to coach and mentor others. And then I had an opportunity to go to the B-Cert class, where I met Glenn LeBlanc, who was a trainer. He was one of the trainers in my 07 class. And through those connections, I was able to get my name in the hat for staff. So I came on staff in 2010. I taught 4 classes my first year. I developed 2 classes from scratch and rewrote or modified 2 others. And because I was doing those, they asked if I wanted to teach them, and I did. And I found out later that was a very rare thing. They didn't want new staff to teach anything more than a one or 2 hour block. And I ended up teaching 4. I guess I did a good job because they asked me back. But it's interesting you bring that up, though, because back then, like I said, when I went through in 07, we were on Diskette, and as we were on staff, we're dealing with free DOS and licensing issues with all that. And I was having drinks with one of the directors, the director of training at the time, Keith Lockhart, in 2010 at the end of the event. And he was talking about how much he hated disk edit, and he wanted to be away from disk edit, but we didn't want to use automated tools to chain the fat. How would we teach it? And I threw out the recommendation. I said, hey, can't we just do disk? Can't we just learn how to train the fat in hex? And he told me, he said, you figure out how to do that and how we can print it so they'll understand it, and we'll make the switch. So I did. I spent the summer doing all the research on it. I drew it all up, wrote up the article on it, and I sent it to Keith, and he's like, I love it. We're in. Let's build this in. So I ended up rewriting the entire fat class for 2011, and much of that material, almost 90% of that material is still in the class today. Because we're using disk edit now to chain the fat. And now they see it in hex, and it's even better because now when they see the fat in hex, they understand what they're looking at. Instead of disk edit, which actually rendered the fat as these little blocks and gave them a number. So it was almost automating it itself. But yeah, anyway, that was my huge contribution to the training committee back at that time. 2012, 2013, I was nominated to serve on the board for a vacated member. Doug Elrick ultimately was selected. There was a couple names submitted. And then the director of training at the time, Troy Lawrence, actually recommended I run for the board. I gave it some thought and decided, why not? I'll run for the board. And I got elected in 2013, and I've been on the board ever since. Served as the director of e-services for 4 years. After that, I went to vice president for 1 year, and then in 2018, I took over as president from Jim Dibble. And I just finished my 5th year as the president of the organization. Okay. So yeah, they haven't kicked me out yet. So, and I guess I'm doing okay because the board keeps voting me back in as president. So
good. Everybody knows you're the president. What is the role of the president in IACIS? What's the duties and responsibilities?
So if you go read the bylaws says the president is basically the chief executive officer of the organization. So my job in a nutshell is to just make sure that all the spokes of the wheel are all rolling in the same direction. The chairman of the board sets manages the board meetings and runs the board group and helps provide vision for the discussion around vision and where do we want to go in the future. Then my job is to kind of help make us get there. And so I actually have my fingers in a lot of pies, which is, we have a director of standards, we have a director of e-services, we have a vice president who is my backup, but also runs his own committees. Okay. We have the ethics committee, we have certification. So my job is to kind of have my finger on the pulse of what's going on in all those committees to make sure that we are, that we're all working in concert with each other as much as possible. So it can be a big job at times and it can be an easy job at times. But I can tell you from January till this event kicks off, it's a lot of work because I'm interfacing with the hotel and working with training to make sure everybody's got rooms, all the contract stuff's done there. But that's ultimately in a nutshell what I do. And I as the chief executive officer of the organization, I'm responsible for the signing of contracts and committing the organization to any contractual obligation, whether it's financial or other. So, and then of course I can share that with, I can appoint someone else to sign a contract if it's advantageous to do that, or if I'm incapacitated for any reason. And of course, Brent Well steps in as my vice president and can help out in that regard as well. So, but yeah, that's kind of what being the president is. I enjoy it. I have a lot of fun doing it. It can be taxing at times. Sure. You can say, okay, I've given myself 10 years to the organization. Do I want to continue? But you get down here and you get recharged and you get excited again and you want to see, you want to keep moving. You want to keep going. I don't really want to look forward to the day where I'm not coming back here anymore. Right. Because I see all my old friends and it's my opportunity to spend time with everybody and to continue giving back to the Forensic community.
Yeah, understood. It's once a year for a lot of the staff that come down here. We only see each other probably once a year. Yeah. For 2 weeks. Gene, you made the transition from law enforcement to the private sector. There's myself included. There's a number of staff, students, even viewers who are close to that transition to it. How can you tell us the differences? I think work-wise between the two.
Yeah, I think so. So law enforcement is dealing with the criminal element, and there's a really strong focus in law enforcement on child exploitation images, and fraud and criminal conduct. which tends to be focused on one system or one computer, one cell phone. Of course, cell phones have grown immensely since I was in law enforcement.
Absolutely.
I used to hate doing phones when I was in law enforcement because back then they were the flip phones. And there was no cable that plugged into any one of them. You had to find the right one. Some would be supported, some wouldn't. And I just detested phones.
Yes.
Well, phones have come a long way. Now they're a mini computer, and you got these guys, our mobile forensics folks will talk about chip offs and doing full extractions. And so they're really their own animal in the forensic department. But when I left, I came here in, like I said, 2007. Started teaching in 2010, and I was approached and said, "Hey, we think you'd be a good fit to come to IBM and be part of our incident response team." And I was like, "Oh, that scared me." I said, "Dude, I don't do malware. I don't know anything about malware." And so it was a bit of an eye opener. Then the IBM went into a hiring freeze, and then a year later, in 2013, was the year the same year I got on the board was the same year I ended up leaving law enforcement. And the only reason I left law enforcement was, one, the money was good. I had some personal financial issues I was dealing with that helped mitigate, because I loved my job. I did not want to leave law enforcement, but I still had 8.5 years to go. And I was not doing as much forensics in the department as I wanted to. And I wasn't getting the traction from the chief to be able to go into the lab full time. And so I was really afraid I would lose that skill set that I worked so hard to obtain. And so the next year when IBM came off their hiring freeze, I was asked again to apply. And so I submitted, and the pay raise was just what I needed to be able to overcome. And that it's actually opened my career up significantly. I left IBM and went to another company called SecureWorks after 3.5 years. I was with them for just under 2 years, and now I'm with a company called Strauss Freeburg, which has been bought out by Aon, but Strauss Freeburg is now considered a service of Aon. And I like Strauss Freeburg and what we do, because we are not just incident response where we go and put the fire out when somebody's got ransomware or they've got a big security incident, but we also do digital forensic consulting where we call it a bad leaver, where an employee might leave and steal information from their employer to go to another employer. And so a lot of times that can end up in court, civil testimony, civil litigation, where IBM said, no, we're not, if it's a case that's going to end you up in court, we don't want anything to do with it. So Strauss, short for Strauss Freeburg or Aon, we have that. We actually have a couple experts that are former IACIS members and have their CFCE or had their CFCE. And they do a lot of that, writing dispositions, courtroom testimony. Oh, wow. A lot of it. So there is a transformation. If there's anyone that's in law enforcement that's getting ready to retire and transition out, we have the Cypher class that was taught by Randy Stone, Ed Michael, and Tyson Beal, and Rob Blader. And it's a great class to kind of help you understand the different types of investigation. The one thing that is funny is when I was recruited to IBM, it was like I've never walked into a data center and had to pull a bag of meth out from the computer or dust off the cobwebs.
We got the cockroaches inside.
Yeah, and you're not dealing with exploitation images. You're not dealing with the contraband. I mean, you can. There are cases where you could run into that, but you're dealing with is trying to help companies get their security posture up to recover from a breach and overcome that so they don't have a breach again. And so it's really kind of cool, and you run into some really interesting cases. And but it is a different investigation. There's a lot of log analysis. There's a lot of reverse engineering or malware analysis that you kind of have to learn and adapt to. But if you were able to get through your CFCE here and you really apply yourself, you can make the transition. It might take you a year or two to get really comfortable in your own skin doing that other type of investigation. But the Cypher class is a shameless plug for the Cypher class that they will help you kind of understand the different types of investigation. I mean, Tyson Beal, he was law enforcement, doing primarily cell phones, taught our Windows Artifacts class. He came to work for us at Strauss, and he made the transition. He was nervous. It's there's a difference because you're talking with CEOs and C-level execs.
Right.
But he's done a phenomenal job. Now it's not for everybody, but if it's something you have an interest in, pull me aside, get with me or get with Randy, get with Ed Michael, and there's a number of others. Bart Sims, I think, works for another company and does incident response, and he's been a godsend because he's actually works on our e-services committee and helps us make sure that our Office 365 environment is secure for IACIS as a volunteer. So lots to be had here. The forensics forensics isn't just law enforcement anymore. I mean, almost every company out there has an internal, any company of any size has their own internal forensics division. And then they reach out to companies like ours when their incident is too big for them to handle. So, but yeah, I hope that answers your question.
It does, yeah, and because I noticed, several larger organizations have, I guess, cyber insurance that they could take out, I guess, and
that's a whole new animal.
That's a whole other animal.
That's a whole new animal. That's the insurance companies are getting very much involved, and we've really seen the push in the last 3 to 4 years for companies to seek cyber insurance, and then our organization joins panels where the insurance company reaches out to a breach coach, and then the breach coach has a relationship with us. And a lot of companies are doing this now, where in order to have their insurance company cover the breach, you have to follow their process and procedure and their recommend. It's like your insurance saying, well, we don't want you to go to this. You get your car in an accident. We don't want you to go to that one, but we will approve. here's our list of approved body shops. Right. Yeah. It's kind of similar.
Same system.
But it is. We're seeing a big push for the insurance in the insurance industry, and our company has been working hard to get in front of that and be part of that process.
Sure.
So, as are many others.
Yeah. Yeah. Gene, we talked about, and this just to close things up. We talked about the history of IACIS, the past. We talked about the state of IACIS in the current day. Where do you see IACIS in the future, in short term, future?
So the board's been working on, last year we've been working on a 5-year plan.
Okay.
And, traditionally we've always taught this big event in Florida. It was only the one event. Largely because we are a volunteer organization, we're a little bit limited to how many instructors we can provide.
Right.
We want to maintain our instruction quality. So, and then we have an event in Europe that is for the OLAF, which is the anti-fraud division of the European Union. And so that event's always happened in Europe, but it's a private event. We don't sell stuff. They bring in people and we go teach it. Here is an event that we sell. And we have also historically done events in I think they did a BCFE in Australia back in 2008, 2009, somewhere around there. It was quite a long time ago. And then they've done some specialized classes in Australia. Brent Well, who is a significant player in bringing a consortium together in New Zealand with different agencies. We taught the WFE down there, which is our Windows Forensic Examiner in New Zealand. They taught our Cypher class. There was a handful of classes that went down there to New Zealand until that consortium separated. So we've done that historically. So what IACIS wants to do now going forward is, and we're trying to really invest in our instructors. This year I think we had 20-something or 17 staff come down to go through our Train the Trainer to try to help get that quality where we want it. Because ultimately we would like to try to teach another BCFE either on the West Coast of the U.S. at some point in the year. And we're targeting 2024, 2025. Okay. We've been asked to teach in a number of locations, and those locations are currently being vetted to find out if it's feasible. And those classes would be classes that are sold. So part of the problem with that is we have to identify a trusted partner in that region that we can work under, and got to get a lot of prep work has to be done for that to happen. But we do hope to be teaching 3 BCFEs, including this one, the one in Europe, and one somewhere else, whether it's Australia, Singapore, Western United States, wherever. We'd like to have that happen in 2024, 2025, and potentially even bigger if we can get the staff and we can grow the staff to where we can send this out and get it to where we can teach it around the world. That's ultimately what we would like to do.
Yeah, that would be nice. Kyle, if we just, did a podcast from Singapore at a BCFE event, that would be great, Well,
let's not get carried away. I mean, we've been asked to go to Barbados too, but Barbados is only a 2-hour flight from here, so it's a little hard to justify Barbados, and I don't know how we could sell a class in Barbados, but nothing's off the table. Yeah, we'll look at anything. If we're being invited, we were actually invited to Tanzania. So that's we were invited to Tanzania a number of years back to teach a WFE class, but we got to be careful too, because some countries that want us to come and teach them are high-risk countries, and a lot of our instructors are government, and government says we're not going to let our instructors go there. So So there's a balance. We have to look at it, and that's
Yeah.
what we formed a new events committee that's being chaired by our vice president.
Okay.
And they're doing a lot of that early leg work to find out, is this tangible? Can it work? And then as we start getting to that point, then once we have contract signed and we're off and running, then it'll go operational, and we'll make it happen. We'll find the staff and get the seats sold. So
that's good. Tremendous growth plans there. That's good. That's good. Gene, anything in closing? Got anything else for our viewers before we close up?
I'm going to beat the IACIS drum again. I mean, I think that, I fell in love with the organization when I came here in 2007, but I can't express enough how much this organization's opened the world to me. I mean, I had an opportunity to go teach in Germany for IACIS. I had the opportunity to teach in New Zealand for IACIS. And it's just those of you that are sitting in the BCFE class, in my opinion, you've hit the lottery, because you can finish your law enforcement career out, and I recommend that you do, so you get that retirement pension. But keep it up, keep your CFC current, because there's a huge demand for forensic practitioners that understand good work ethic.
Yes.
And with a lot of them in there being law enforcement, they understand the need for work ethics, or good, strong ethics, where sometimes hiring outside of law enforcement, you don't always get that ethical, stuff. So I just think that what this organization has done for me personally has just been amazing. I know it's done the same for a number of others. And study hard, do well. Don't procrastinate on your CFCE. Don't cheat, because we are a very ethical organization, and cheating is your. I think when I went through the police academy, they said if you lie, you die.
Yeah, absolutely.
And here it's the same thing.
Yeah.
If you lie, you die. If you're cheating, you're lying, and if you lie, you die.
Yes.
And we can't stress to you enough. And unfortunately, as the president, I get to sign those revocation letters, and it sucks, because it really sucks to have to sign those revocation letters from people who are law enforcement that are cheating, thinking they can get away with it. So, I think that's probably all I have.
Excellent.
Thanks
Gene,
for your time, Was.
thank you for coming on.
Absolutely.
Gene Shantz, President of IACIS.
Oh,
Thanks,
you flatter me. Let me go find my Secret Service entourage now.